is Amy Cook from Carnegie Mellon University, and today we're talking about flow control. Without flow control, code will execute one line after the other from top to bottom, no matter what. And that's just not very interesting. So flow control statements let us decide when and how often to execute certain parts of our code. We'll go over 3 basic flow control statements. I'll be writing code examples in Java. If you're teaching a different language, that's okay. The concepts are the same. So if-else statements. We use these so that if something is true, we do one part of the code. Else, if something is not true, we do a different part of the code. Here are some examples. If the temperature is less than 32 degrees, we print out, baby, it's cold outside. If the temperature is more than 32, then we wouldn't print anything. In our second example, if it's snowing, if our is snowing variable is true, we print, do you want to build a snowman? Else, if it's not snowing, we print, let's stay inside. Notice that if our if condition is true, our is snowing condition is true, we do not do the thing in the else statement. We're picking either we build a snowman or we stay inside, depending on if it's snowing, but we're not doing both. If you have more than 2 choices, you can add else-if statements, as many else-if statements as you want, depending on how many conditions you have. So in this example, we're deciding if we're going to do action 0, action 1, or action 2. We're going to pick either action 0, action 1, or action 2, and then do action 3. Action 3 is not in the if-else chain, so we're always doing action 3. So for example, if test 0 is true, we're going to do action 0, action 3. If test 0 is false, then we're going to check test 1. If test 1 is true, then okay, we're doing action 1 and action 3. Otherwise, if test 0 is false and test 1 is false, we're doing action 2 and action 3. But we're only doing either action 0, action 1, or action 2. We're not doing more than one of those. Here's an example, another example of an if-else statement. And some questions. What would we print if the temperature was these different values on the right? So pause the video and write down what you think would be printed out by this code for these given values of temperature. Here are the answers. If our temperature is 30, we're going to check if 30 is less than 32. Yes, it is, so we're printing baby, it's cold outside, and then we're done. If our temperature is 60, well, we check, is 60 less than 32? No. Else if, okay, is 60 less than 75? Yes, wonderful weather. Number 3, if our temperature is 75, we check, is 75 less than 32? Nope. Is 75 less than 75? No. So we're doing our else, it's too toasty. Same thing for 93. 93 is not less than 32. 93 is not less than 75, so we're printing it's too toasty. Let's move on to while loops. Loops give you the power to execute the same part of your code over and over again, so you write it once and do it as many times as you need to. While loops have 3 parts. The first is a test. So before each iteration of the loop, we're checking if something is true. If it's true, we get a green light to go into the loop and do what the loop wants to do. Eventually, our test should be false, or else the loop will run forever. So the second part of a while loop is the work. This is the thing that we want to do each time we run the loop, the thing we're going to do a billion times in a row. And then we have our increment. This is code that we write in our loop to advance things, change our variables so that we get closer to making the test false. Here's an example. In this loop, we have our test is count less than 5. So every time we run this loop, we're checking if our count is less than 5 before we run the loop. Our work is our print statement in yellow. We want to print out the count and what the value of our count is. And then our increment in pink is that every time we print out the count value, after that, we're going to update the value of the count before we go back to the top of the loop. So pause the video and write down what you think this code will print out. Here's the answer. Let's walk through it. We start with count being 0. We then go into our while loop. We check, is 0 less than 5? Yes, so we have a green light, we go into our loop. We print count 0, we add 1 to our count variable. Count now equals 1. We go back to the top of the loop and we check, is 1 less than 5? Yes, green light. So we print count 1 and then we add 1 to our count. Count is now 2. Go back to the top. 2 is less than 5, so we print count 2, add 1 to count. Count is now 3. Back to the top. 3 is less than 5. We print count 3, we add 1 to count. Count is now 4. Back to the top. 4 is less than 5. Print count 4, add 1 so that count is now 5. Back to the top. We check, is 5 less than 5? No! We're done with our loop. We go to the next line of code after our loop. We print all done. The most common bug you'll get with loops is accidentally creating an infinite loop, a loop that will never end. So here's an example of an infinite loop. Pause the video, write down what you think this loop will print out every time, and then see if you can find the bug. Here's our bug. We never actually changed the value of count. So because we didn't update our count variable, our test, count greater than 5, would never be false, so our loop would never ever stop. Let's move on to for loops. For loops are a kind of while loop. We use them to step through the value of a variable. Here's an example. For loops have 4 parts. We have an initiating value of our loop variable, so we set I equal to 0 in this case as our initiating value. We then have a test. Is I less than 5? So we check that test every time we run the loop. The third part is an increment. We have I plus plus. This means that we're adding 1 to our value for I. We're doing I plus 1 every time we run this loop. And then we have the body of our statement. So we're printing out, the work we're doing is to print out the value of I every time. So take a pause, write down what you think this code will print. Here's the answer. We'll just step through it really quickly. We start with I equals 0. 0 is less than 5, so we print count 0. Then we add 1. Count is 1. We check, is 1 less than 5? Yes, we print count 1. Add 1 to I is now 2. 2 is less than 5, so we print count 2, add 1 to I. 3 is less than 5, we print count 3, add 1 to I. 4 is less than 5, we print count 4, add 1 to I is now 5. 5 is not less than 5, we failed our test, so we exit the loop and print all done. As I'm sure you noticed, this is the exact same output as our while loop example from earlier. So here, take a look. These are the while loop on the left and the for loop on the right. You can see they have the same test, is our variable less than 5. The same work in yellow, we're printing out the value of our incremental variable every time. And the same increment, we're adding 1 to our variable every time. So just know these two loops are doing exactly the same thing. They look a little different, but it's the same concept. So that's all for today. Just a quick note though, if you or your students would like more practice, there are lots of websites online that let you practice for loops, while loops, if statements, else statements. CodingBat and Codecademy.com are both 2 examples of free practice materials should you need that. Good luck and happy coding!